Coogs House. You've heard from myself and others in the Houston Cougar world all week about how big this week was for recruiting. But what's the national perspective?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. We appreciate you making us your first listen each and every day. If you want to join the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us if you consider Teddy Grahams animal crackers. Think about it before you answer, but tell us in the comments down below wherever you got this podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. More on that in a minute. That's an exciting one for sure. But we've been talking ad nauseum this week about the big signing of Keisean Henderson over the weekend. I can't express, and I can't continue to express just how big a deal this is for Houston. So you know how we do it around here. We'll get our national perspective from Brian Smith. Let's bring on Brian. And you know, with big recruiting news this week, we are joined by Locked On's recruiting expert and host of Locked On Seminoles, Brian Smith. Brian, how are you doing today? And do you consider, or have you ever thought of, Teddy Grahams as animal crackers?
I'm doing good. At least I was until you asked me that question. But, I'm not answering that question.
Okay. Fair enough.
Unbelievable.
In a more serious note, Houston had a big commitment over the weekend. It was Monday, but Memorial Day, that's part of the weekend. I probably should ask you something about Memorial Day, Jeff. Good Memorial Day. That's probably a more normal question. My question about Keisean, though. Keisean Henderson commits to the University of Houston, and I want to talk a lot about his game and what kind of things you see. But the biggest question is that he was the number one ranked athlete in the class of 2026 on several recruiting boards. And Houston offered him and he committed as a quarterback. You see him. Do you think quarterback? Obviously a very athletic kid. But what do you think?
I think I would start him at quarterback. He has a natural enough throwing motion. Trying to think of a way to compare it. Javelin thrower, center fielder in baseball, guy that goes out and is your shortstop in baseball. In basketball is a wing guy, a two guard or something. Lengthy, athletic, but the ball just flies out of his hand. With his athleticism, obviously he's going to make some guys miss, and he did on film, but he stays in the pocket and takes some shots and throws it. He's not the thickest kid in the world, and I'm not saying he is this player, but built like, plays like Jaden Daniels in that style. Like Jaden's got a pretty good arm. This kid does too. And I also think that he's good enough athlete that if it didn't work out at quarterback, he could go play free safety or something. It's a winner chicken dinner for Houston on this one because local kid too. They don't get those guys. They always fail with the local kids, and you and I talk bad about Houston when that happens. And today we get to talk good about Houston.
Get to talk good about Houston. So he's from Spring, Texas, and you mentioned that's a place where a lot of good football gets played in their backyard.
Oh yeah. 30 minutes from downtown, something like that. 40 minutes.
Yeah.
It's not far.
He's at a smaller school in Spring. And this you may take this to a more broad place, and that's fine. But what do you think about, watching his high school film? He's the best athlete on the field by a lot, right? Like
most of the time, yeah. It's like, okay, this is not hard to figure out.
Right. You know which one I'm asking to look at when I send you the video. What is how do you evaluate that? Because he is so much more talented playing at a smaller division of football.
There's two things that you can look at, and from a positive perspective, and there's still the one that you can't figure out until he's in college. Let's start with the positives. When you're going against an inferior opponent, do you dominate? It's a checkbox. If you're a low strider, a guy that just kind of gets by, gives me the willies. The second part with that, when you're playing against those kind of teams, you generally get to see more of a wider variety of what a guy can do. Because when you're thinking about it this way, a mobile quarterback against an elite defense with two good DNs, they'll pin them in, they'll make it difficult. They got to throw from the pocket more. This guy's doing some kind of random stuff, like pass protection breaks down. He'll do everything wrong. Take his eyes down, has the football out, all the things quarterback coaches cuss and scream at. It's just true. I know some of them. Believe me, I've seen it. But he'll still make a play at the high school level. You got to coach him up on things, but he has the athleticism to get away with mistakes against bad competition. Now, doing that at Houston is still not the same as doing that in high school. But, okay, so we've seen a little bit of everything. The athleticism, getting out of danger, although shaky with the technique, still makes plays. And he dominates the competition. Now, here's the concern. When you play competition like that, there is a learning curve from stepping up from like 2A football or whatever he's playing to going to University of Houston. Because when he's playing against Oklahoma State in 2 years or whatever it is, they're going to be a lot bigger, faster, and stronger, and probably not very friendly along the way either. So if you hold the ball out, it's going the other direction. If you wait too long, it's going the other direction. If your eyes go down, you're in trouble. Like he's got a lot of technical things. Does he translate it? You don't know. Quarterback's really hard to project anyway. Lower level kids are a nightmare at quarterback. You just don't know how they're going to adjust to the speed of the game. You just got to wait and see.
Well, speed of the game's one thing. You mentioned one other thing, though. He's a tall, longer kid, and he sits in the pocket, and I thought it was impressive. He takes hits as he's throwing the ball, like takes some shots. Do you worry about that with the skinnier kid? I mean, he's not 225. He's like more like 180.
It's funny you mentioned that because last year Jaden Daniels said, when I talk to other quarterbacks, I tell them not to play like me. Yeah, because Jaden, you're stupid. Look what you're doing. He plays like that in the NFL, he'll be cut in half. Okay. Even Jackson over there in Baltimore, he'll slide or get out of bounds. There are times when he does, not always, but like if he's doing it, I don't need to know anything else because he's as freaky as it gets.
Yeah.
You've got to get out of the way of the dead-on shots. There was that flea flicker play on his film. He threw a bomb. He didn't get hit by one guy. Like two guys hit him. One hit him square in the abdomen. Like if that happens in college, bro, it's iffy if you're getting up for a while. Like full on, you're going into it and he hits you. That's a car wreck. Literally, that's like being in a car wreck. So, yeah, he needs to learn how to throw and get out of harm's way while doing it's. There's certain plays that are timing plays that it's a problem. But everything else, like, look, I'd rather the guy throw it incomplete and not get hit. Like, you cannot have your quarterback get hurt.
Yeah.
Look at any level of football. Look at the record before the quarterback's hurt and then after. I know which one's better. Okay. Quarterback can't get hurt. You can have 5 All-Americans on your offensive line. You're going to suck up because you ain't got a quarterback no more. He's got to learn to get out of the way.
It's just too important. And I will say there's a level of toughness to his game that I appreciate. It's learning to, be tough in other spots and be smart there, right? Like there's just something to that. And again, he's young. He's a sophomore in high school. People grow out of these kinds of things and learn sometimes the hard way how to get out of these kinds of things. You mentioned Daniels and Lamar. Do you think he's going to be a zone read with, the occasional deep shot kind of guy, or can he be a quarterback that sits in the pocket and really does nickel and dime you if you force it? Because defenses can pick up on that, right?
2 parts to it. Number one, athletically, yes, he can definitely be an RPO guy. Run option, quarterback bootleg, buck sweep, where they pull the guards one way and the quarterback fakes him out and goes the opposite because he's a good enough athlete to get out of trouble. But more importantly, just looking at it from where he's at now compared to what somebody like Lamar wasn't a very good passer out of high school, being nice. He had a big arm, and it was like he went and played for the guy's an idiot, but like a certain head coach at the time at Louisville, he can coach quarterbacks. Took a couple years, but by the end of his redshirt freshman year, like, we might have something here. Then, of course, the next year, he just annihilated college football.
All right, now the Houston Cougars are set up really, really well, and if you want to get set up really, really well for your summer and have some fun things to do, concerts, comedy shows, the theater, Astros, sports games, wherever you are in your area, the best place you got to get tickets from is Game Time. Download the Game Time today and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Now, Game Time is this cool deal where tickets get to be better deals as you get closer to the event. They have last-minute deals, flash deals, different zone deals for part of the venue. And once you pick seats, while you're picking them, they show you what the view is like from that section and row at that venue for that type of event. It's a key feature to make sure you get the best seat in the house and the best deal in the house. They also guarantee they'll give you 110% of the difference in credit if you find tickets in the same section and row for less somewhere else. So make sure you go check out Game Time right now. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed.
Look, it depends on how bad you want it. Lamar wanted to prove everybody wrong. He had a chip on his shoulder you can't teach. One of my buddies, because I said something to him once about one of his players, that kid's a jerk. And he goes, yeah, he's got Jordan traits. Like he's got a chip on his, like Mike. Nobody liked Mike. Like he was painted.
No, that's the running joke out of the documentary show, the movie, the TV show that was like 10 episodes or whatever, right? Like he was a jerk of a teammate, but he made everyone a lot better, right? Like
they're like guys like that don't make teams unless they're elite, because the coach is like, I ain't gonna deal with you if you're the ninth guy. I can get another ninth player. I ain't got to deal with it.
Yeah, that's true.
Seriously, you got a longer leash. You know, like Charles Barkley was a complete idiot. Go out and drink all the time, cause problems, but he'd also go 1-on-4 and dunk. They didn't have any way to replace it. So, but anyway, this is the situation. He throws it pretty well at his age. He's ahead of where Lamar was like a year or so in advance. Pretty natural throwing motion. It's not consistent. Footwork, balance, how far he strikes, like all kinds of little things are different from play to play. But even though he does that, like there was a couple, like he overstrided, etc. The ball still ended up where it needed to, which is weird, but he has natural feel and touch. Some guys have terrible shooting motions in basketball. Like that is ugly as sin, and they can shoot. It's weird. Certain guys are like that. I'm not saying his is ugly, but it needs some refinement. It's in the middle ground. He'll shorten up his motion. It'll be more consistent. His stride will be quicker. They'll get faster with his motion. And he's got an arm. What's his arm going to be like after he plays in college for a year, then goes through the spring weight training program?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he's going to have a cannon. So I think he can play quarterback. I understand the knock. Oh, he's an athlete. This kid can play quarterback. He's a sophomore in high school right now. What is the lowest position on the planet to learn? It's quarterback. It's going to be a while. Talk to me in 3 years about where he's at. And until then, he needs to play that position for sure.
I'm excited to see him come in and play quarterback. And I made the case when he committed today that I think he's a quarterback as well. And I feel a little validated. But the other conversation has been that he's not the only quarterback to commit to Houston this spring. We talked, I think it was just last week, Brian, that 2025's Austin Carlisle, another area kid, a year older, right? 2025 class, considered a dual threat or an athlete. He's actually moved up some recruit boards after his commitment to Houston. For what it's worth, he's about 5'11", a little bit different athlete, but also an athlete. How would you compare the two?
That kid's got a pretty good release. He's more advanced. You can tell the year mattered. I'd say the biggest difference is the quickness of the release. When he decides he's going to throw it, that is a short motion. Like it is. There's one Dan Marino. I don't know if I'll ever see a better release than Dan. I'm not comparing that, but like for a high school kid, it's pretty good. And he's got a nice deep ball. But if you're an idiot and you decide we're just going to blitz him, and you don't have a lot of guys to tackle well, he can also run through 7 guys and make your team look really dumb on YouTube. So
he's done that.
Yeah. So like, I'm not saying that he's going to be the next Heisman winner that makes all these highlight plays, but he is in that realm. Boy, Texas always seems to have this smaller quarterback that can run around. It's crazy how Texas always has that guy coming out of the state. But anyway, he's one of them. I just think that his pure foot speed is a whole nother level. Like that kid hits the gas. He's got nitrous. So he could be a slot for somebody if he wanted to play it. I'm not saying he does, and be a nightmare. athlete like that with the ball on the goal line, 4th and 1 play of the game, if you're the defensive coordinator, you're like, throw the ball, don't run. I don't want to see him. You know what I mean? I don't want to run past because he's too athletic. He's going to put a lot of pressure on teams. They're different, but they're both mobile. And it's just like he's the guy that can just run for the pylon, not have the angle, and still score. Like Willie's a good coach. He ain't got to do nothing there. Just don't screw that up.
Just to get out of the way. Get out of the way. So we've got these two guys who are both athletic quarterbacks, and Houston has kind of made a living, even going back to like Andre Ware, on finding guys that other people project as a safety or a receiver. Like, no, I think you can do it. And it's nice to see that continue as almost a legacy with the program, whether it's Greg Ward or whomever, right? Do you think it's beneficial to have multiple, like, is there a logjam created, or is there a positive created having a 2025 top-end athletic quarterback and a 2026, like the top-end athletic, and then he also plays quarterback?
Yeah, because now you've got a trend, and you've also got depth. Somebody gets hurt, you've got another. There's so many positives with their Texas kids. They're guys you got early enough. They impacted the rest of the recruiting class. All the above is good. I think Willie being a part of it, I think kids are going to trust him because, like we were talking before the show, Tulane was not beating LSU for kids in state, okay? They coach kids up. It's the same program, one state over. It really is. And to be honest, it's easier at Houston because they have lower academic standards. It's just true. Like Tulane's a high-end school. It's a bigger pain in the butt to get kids in school there. And he still won there. So, like, the future is bright for Houston if they allow Fritz and his whole staff to do their thing. It'll be a slow build, but when it hits like year 3, it'll hit. I've said it forever, and I know you've talked about it too. Houston is a sleeping giant if the administration ever decided to allow it.
It really could become a floodgate of sorts, and the Big 12 thing helps. Willie Fritz helps. I was going to point out, but you kind of beat me to the punch. You've said since we hired Fritz, this is a year 2. Year 1's going to be bad. Year 2's going to be all right. Year 2's you've got a chance to be pretty good. Or year 3, I'm sorry, you got a chance to be pretty good. And this is weirdly like Keisean being class of 2026. That's like the moment he's stepping on campus, right? Like that. The way this times out is interesting. You've been around national recruiting and seen guys that are really, really good at recruiting all over the country. And projecting that out, is that timing intentional, on purpose? Is it just you're just getting a really good kid in the Houston area? Like, what's the thought there?
Random, man. When you sent me that, and I like, oh, he committed or whatever. I was like, okay, didn't see that coming, and I'm going to go out on a limb and speak for you now. You didn't either. So
not this early. No,
they don't get kids like that at Houston early. They don't. So I know there's connection there with his coach and all that, but still, he didn't have to commit. He could have waited on the LSU offer. He could have waited for Baylor. He could have waited for Oklahoma or whatever. He wanted to go to Houston. Now you got to take advantage of it, because not only is he committed early and highly ranked, he's quarterback. Think about how many good receivers are within a 100-mile radius of the city you live in. At least one of those kids that the Notre Dames and Oklahomas and USC's offer, they got to get in his class. All for naught unless you get dudes outside the numbers.
Well, and so class 2026, we got a long time to build. Kids do commit earlier and earlier these days, but got a long time to build. Would you put receiver or left tackle or safety, because you need to have some balance, at which would be the highest priority to get next? You mentioned building a class around Henderson. They've got offers out to a bunch of guys, but positionally, does it matter, or would you say no, top priority has to be XYZ?
Depends on where they're hurting the most, but look at it this way. The portal is kind of the guide. Where were the 2 spots that nobody had enough numbers at? OT and DT. The numbers that I were told at those spots, starting bids, Houston is out of the game already, like literally. So
By number, you
7
mean like NIL dollar number, like high? Yeah. Okay.
800K is chicken feed. So that's not good for Houston. They're not going to win the NIL game for the fourth-year redshirt junior transferring from Louisiana Lafayette that only had 3 offers out of high school, but got 3 inches taller and added 40 pounds. That random guy, nobody offered him. Like, wait a minute, that's not the same. Oh, it is the same kid. No, we want you. That kid's going to get the NIL money. So unless there's some booster comes along and decides to pay for Houston, and it could happen, they got to get the high school kids that are local, make it cool to go to Houston, not just everybody go to A&M, LSU, Oklahoma, and Texas. Those 4 schools, it's scorched earth with the 4 and 5-star kids in Texas. Then there's like one kid will go to Georgia, one kid will go to Notre Dame, one kid will go to Ohio State. Before you know it, the top 20 kids, like 3 stayed in state that didn't go to Texas or Texas A&M, maybe. That's because dad went to Baylor, dad went to Texas Tech, and dad went to TCU. You know what I mean? Like, Houston has to get a few of these kids. There's only so much you can get to until you get a few guys. And it starts in the trenches, especially. There's just not enough of them. If you're going to get quarterbacks like this, it'd be nice to get a left tackle. If you're going to dream, like LT is the first thing. You got to have blindside quarterback protection. And it's also a message, because like UT and A&M over the last 5, they have killed it recruiting big guys on both sides of the ball, honestly. Houston never gets that guy, especially. If you take one of the kids that they want out of the Houston area, that's a 4 or 5-star offensive tackle, that would send a different message.
Well, and it's like you mentioned, they're right there in the backyard, the same way that Keisean was, the same way that Austin Carlisle was. These guys are right there in the city of Houston. It's about getting one to stay. Keisean, the folks listening to the show probably know, but Keisean was very clear in his social media presence after the commitment, like, this is about staying home, right? Like that. He mentioned home, and you mentioned as well his high school coach played for Willie back at Blinn Junior College, and all these like family type of things about being at Houston. Now we got to go find someone that weighs like 3 bills that does the same kind of thing, right? Like,
not easy, man.
It's just not. It's not, especially when you mentioned there are other factors like just dollars and cents out there. It's hard to speak louder than green sometimes. I gotta ask. You mentioned I was surprised. I thought Houston had a pretty good committing this early was a lot. I thought Houston had a pretty good shot because they looked at him as a quarterback.
That helps.
Other people had him as a top-rated athlete. You mentioned it helps. How big a factor is that, before we wrap the show here, is Houston really in this game because Sean Bell said that kid can play quarterback for me, not just play for me?
I'm sure that's part of it. My guess is in today's game, though, he probably had other offers in the same realm. I don't know that, but there's been a lot more leeway because RPO is important. So again, don't just think that's the only it helps. Anybody saying you're playing receivers out, I'm sure. I would guess that it was a small part of it, but he wanted to be a part of something different, or else he wouldn't have committed to Houston. Good for him.
Good for him. Good for us. Obviously, the name of the game now is keeping him. You think that's going to be difficult because of how talented he is? I can kind of judge by the way you've had somebody like is keeping a kid 2 years out of his signing day that challenging?
It's incredibly challenging because now you're marked. It's different if you have, like, look at it this way. Georgia will get kids committed early like that. There's a kid, they got a running back that's in this class, committed early from Philadelphia. It's been so long ago that he decommitted. I'd forgotten until I ran across his name again.
Okay.
He decommitted from Georgia. Okay. If kids decommit from UGA, anything is possible. So, yeah, it'll be hard, but he's a quarterback. He must be looking at things a little differently than most guys. That's my guess.
He's a little bit different kid, and we're going to keep learning more about him in the time between now and hopefully the day he signs. Commitment is big, but as we're stressing here, it's not the final. It's a big step, not the final step. Brian, pleasure as always. Tell people where they can find you and the things you're doing these days.
Well, we are finally to the recruiting time of year. Like every weekend for the next 3 or 4 weekends is just straight on recruiting. So at FBScout_Florida, all things recruiting. I'm not sure there's going to be a ton of Houston Cougars news. We'll find out. But there's going to be recruiting across the country from UCLA to Miami, from Notre Dame to LSU. It's going to be crazy. Official visit news, commitments, little inside scoop here or there. It'll be fun.
Thank you for coming on. I hope we get a lot of Houston Cougar news. That would mean some of those top guys in the country are on your radar and on ours. That'd be nice. That'd be nice.
There you go.
Take care, Brian. Always a fun time to have Brian on. Got to crack a couple jokes along the way as well. Thank you again to Brian Smith, our Locked On recruiting expert. He's an expert around the network. He's a great resource to have. Does recruiting all over the nation. Great to have his insight as to Keisean and the other guys coming through Houston as well. Thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. We're finishing up the week some more with a couple different things going on in, I guess, the world of Houston Cougar sports tomorrow. I don't want to get too specific. I don't want to give away the tea too much. Make sure you subscribe. Hit the bell so you know when we go live on YouTube. We'll be giving you the latest on the Houston Cougars each and every day. Locked On Cougs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team, our Houston Cougars, every day. Go Cougs.